What's it like reading Goosebumps as an adult? We've looked at the first 13 stories in previous videos. Check the Revisiting Goosebumps playlist if you missed any. But today is a very special day because today's the day we get to revisit number 14, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. And number 15, You Can't Scare Me. But anyway, back to this one. I've had a horror fascination with werewolves most of my life, and I think it all started with this story. But frankly, I kind of wonder if it was the TV episode that was responsible for this, or if it was the book. Which one gets the credit? So let's wade through the mud and muck and re-experience one of the best stories Goosebumps has to offer. And one of the very worst. If you'd like to play Goose Bingo during this video, simply scan the QR code or there's a link in the description. Over the course of the video, I'm going to be calling out Goose Bingo tropes as I see them, but I want to make sure you know that you can play Goose Bingo however you want. You can count squares even if I don't call them out. You can refresh the bingo card in between stories or have the same one for both stories. Whatever's the most fun for you. And let me know in the comments if you get bingo. Although I should warn you, if you lie about getting bingo, I'll know. The 14th book in the original series, Werewolf of Fever Swamp, was released in December 1993. Cover art's great. I love the depiction of the swamp in the background. It's got that nuclear green color with the fog rolling in. Really cool atmosphere. The pink sky, the full moon. I wouldn't change anything about the composition. It's some of Tim Jacobus's best work. The only gripe I really have is the depiction of the werewolf. Typically with werewolves, I like to see more of their human side because they're supposed to be this beast that's at the intersection of man and wolf, right? But this thing's just 100% wolf. In the compendium, The Art of Goosebumps, Tim Jacobus supplied some of his concept sketches, and frankly, I like the depiction of the werewolf more on sketch 1 and 4. I think I know why they decided to go with a more realistic wolf depiction for the final cover, but I'll save those thoughts for later. The green and blue color scheme matches the illustration really well, so that gets a pass from me. Overall, it's a very solid cover, but I'm not sure I'd count it among the best in the series. I give it 4 out of 5 Necronomicons. The Werewolf of Fever Swamp is a revered story among Goosebumps fans. It's often cited alongside The Haunted Mask as one of its scariest. In a previous video, I decided that The Haunted Mask still holds up pretty well. But how about Fever Swamp?
I got a fever, and the only prescription is Goosebumps.
Our story begins with, stop me if you've heard this one before, the main character moving into a new house. The main character being 12-year-old Grady Tucker, portrayed in the TV episode by actor Brendan Fletcher. He's had many roles over the years, including playing Krampus in the film Violent Night.
Everybody get up, it's time for a murder!
Although you may also recognize him as Robert from The Last of Us, among other roles.
Sure.
It's always interesting to me to see what the Goosebumps actors are up to these days. Sometimes they're still acting today, like Ryan Gosling from Say Cheese and Die. And other times, the Goosebumps episode they starred in is the only thing they've ever done, like the actress who played Lucy in The Girl Who Cried Monster. Brendan Fletcher does a good job portraying Grady, better than most Goosebumps actors, I would say. And I hate to get too granular in critiques of child actors, but his voice kind of sounds like he has a cold.
My parents are scientists.
It's like he has a case of the sniffles the entire episode. It's really distracting. Really putting the fever in Fever Swamp. Anyway, so the book has just the one line about them moving to a new house in Florida, which is kind of funny. Mr. Stein just sort of glosses over it to get to the howling outside at night. But the episode is even funnier because Grady's mom tries to sell him on this absolutely awful looking house.
Is this a blood stain?
No, that's just, dry rot.
I'm sorry, you've got dry rot on the walls of your child's bedroom. Girl, I'm with the kid. This place is a dump. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Grady's parents are both scientists, and they're in Florida to run an experiment on South American swamp deer to see if they can survive in a Florida swamp. Now, if you're curious like I was about whether or not these are real, the answer is yes, but they're apparently called marsh deer. And they have unique webbed hooves for traversing wetlands. So they exist, they're just not called swamp deer. Now, if you're like me, again, you may be wondering, is there a difference between a swamp and a marsh? Or how about a bog? What's a bog? Reddit user SpaceNut37 summarizes it like this. All three are a type of wetland. A marsh is a wetland dominated by non-woody plants like grasses and reeds. A swamp is a wetland dominated by wood plants like trees. And a bog is a wetland that accumulates dead plant material like moss. Isn't it fun learning things about the world around us? And I've already forgotten the difference. Which one is the one with the moss? Grady decides to go exploring in the nearby swamp with his 16-year-old big sister, Emily. Emily is played by actress Myron Bennett, who was 20 years old at the time. I think she's probably the oldest person in the series to play a Goosebumps kid. She does a good job playing a whiny older sister, though. The first 8 chapters of the book are about Emily and Grady's little walkabout in the swamp. It's completely omitted from the episode. And I understand why. There's a couple moments where they prank each other, like Grady pretending to spot an alligator, or Emily pretending to push Grady into the swamp, as illustrated by Gabriel Hernandez in the abridged graphic novel version here. Overall, it seems like this sequence was mainly to give the foundation of Emily and Grady having a surprisingly wholesome dynamic. They quibble back and forth a little bit, but considering they get lost in the swamp at one point, they ended up looking out for each other pretty well. As they wander through the swamp, they happen upon a mysterious shack. Grady decides to just walk up and open the front door for some reason. Can't imagine why that wouldn't be a good idea. That's when the owner of the shack comes out from behind the door. It's a creepy swamp hermit. Emily and Grady decide to book it with the hermit in pursuit and soon find themselves safely back home. It really seemed like Mr. Stein was building up Emily and Grady as the rare Goosebumps sibling team, which we haven't seen in a story since Margaret and Casey Brewer in Stay Out of the Basement. Mr. Stein started out the book series with the siblings teaming up and working together, because he did that in Welcome to Dead House as well. And then as the series went on, he seemed to prefer it when they squabbled and pranked one another instead. So it was nice to see Emily and Grady go on this little jaunt together, even if it was kind of pointless. Weirdly though, this is where the sibling bonding ends, and for the rest of the story, Emily just kind of whines in the background about Grady's new dog. We'll get to that in a minute. In the episode, Grady gets lost in the swamp by himself. No Emily this time.
I'm not lost.
Well, I'm not owned. Well, I'm not owned. And then he just sort of runs straight into the swamp hermit. It's a lot less cinematic than stumbling upon his swamp shack. Grady's dad, Mr. Tucker, dismisses the swamp hermit encounter and says the people in town say he's perfectly harmless. He loves saying this, by the way. The hermit is supposed to be perfectly harmless. That old swamp hermit is supposed to be harmless.
He just lives off the land, doesn't harm anybody.
That's all well and good, Mr. Tucker, but when your kids tell you he was chasing them through the swamp, I'd be a little more concerned. If my 2 kids, breathlessly, eyes wide, told me that an old man chased them, I would completely discount what the guy at the hardware store said about the man. Do we have a bingo square for bad parenting? No, we don't. But we do have one for parent doesn't believe child, which I think definitely applies here. Grady's hanging around outside, but turns to go back in the house, and that's when a hand grabs his shoulder. The swamp hermit's hand! Just kidding. It's the neighbor boy, Will Blake. All right, I think we can file that one under chapter cliffhanger was a straight up lie. There's normally a couple of these in every Goosebumps story, but Wow, there's a lot of them in this one. 2 hands reached up out of the swamp and grabbed me. Oh, oops, it was just a tree root after all. I get that we need a little tension, but come on. You confused a tree root for a hand? Neighbor boy Will Blake is played by actor Michael Berry, who I best remember as one of the mall cops in the Dawn of the Dead remake.
See? Told you I saw something.
Coincidentally, he also kind of sounds like he has the sniffles. So every scene between Grady and Will, I couldn't help but find a little funny.
So, what are those deer you got in that pen for?
Oh, my parents are scientists.
Will Blake is an interesting one. In the TV episode, he's a mild-mannered kid, not exactly the sporty type by his own admission.
I'm not much for baseball.
He plays catch with Grady in the graphic novel, but even here he's depicted as a regular-sized kid. But in the book, Grady notes that he's a very broad, big guy. Even says he reminds him of an NFL lineman. And that's not the only difference. In the episode, Will and Grady go exploring, and they happen upon the Hermit Shack. And this is the first time we hear about the possibility of a werewolf in Fever Swamp.
The moon is full tonight. You'll hear him howling and you'll know exactly what he is. Nothing else on Earth howls like that.
Like what?
Like a werewolf.
The book's version of Will is very dismissive of the idea that there's a werewolf around these parts. He argues with neighbor girl Cassie O'Rourke, who doesn't appear in the TV episode, that there's no such thing as werewolves. I guess for the TV episode, they decided to merge Cassie and Will into one character, which means that, once again, our main character Grady has only one friend in the whole world. You know, I swear that in the later books, the main characters have bigger friend groups, but so far in the early books, we've been running into this almost every story. Only one friend for our poor hero.
Aw, friend, football friend.
Grady's singular friend, Will Blake, is quite the conspiracy theorist in the TV show.
People say the swamp starts to grow inside your head. People around here believe there's a fever that comes from this swamp. The old lady who lived there went into the swamp one day and never came out. A couple of years ago, a kid fell in, sucked him down like quicksand. People like him don't age like the rest of us.
It's impossible.
It's true.
And his theories mainly revolve around suspecting the swamp hermit of being a werewolf. In the book, Will doesn't suspect the hermit. In fact, he defends the hermit when Cassie accuses him of being a werewolf. So, yeah, it was an interesting directorial decision to merge those two book characters into one TV character. I actually don't hate it. Cassie was only in 2 scenes in the book, and both times she just yapped about werewolves. I'm glad she's gone, frankly. Grady wakes up in the middle of the night to see the full moon outside his window and loud, angry howls. Grady starts nervously walking around the house when suddenly he's attacked by a wild animal. A vicious lick attack.
Did I hear someone screaming? Whoa.
It was Grady. He was being licked to death.
So yeah, this dog just shows up and becomes Will's best friend. Will begs his parents to let him keep the dog, and Mr. and Mrs. Tucker are a little skeptical at first, but with minimal convincing, they decide they'll allow it. Yeah, I know. They even let the dog sleep in Grady's room the very next night. I gotta say, and you're probably picking this up by the expressions on my face, I'm really not impressed by the scientist parents. They're gathering all this data that should be red flags, and they're just shrugging. A swamp hermit menacingly chasing my kids home? Well, the guy at the hardware store said he was harmless. A wild dog, a huge wild dog shows up at our doorstep? Why not let him sleep in the same room as my young son? I do love this interaction here, though, when Grady's begging for them to let him keep the dog. He says he needs a pet out there, and his dad frowns and says, "You have the deer for pets." And then he stares longingly out the window at the deer pen like he's apologizing to them for his rude son. Yeah, sure, Dad, let's play fetch with the deer. Come on, man, get it together. By the way, I'm gonna file this moment under pet jump scare, even though the dog's not technically a pet at first. Let's talk about the dog. So you may remember earlier I mentioned that after their little walkabout, Emily's role for the rest of the story would be restricted to complaining about Grady's dog. Well, let the whining begin. Grady very uncreatively decides to name the dog Wolfe because of how large he is. However, the TV show opted for a slightly more interesting name.
Thinking about calling him Vandal on account of the way he broke in last night.
I don't love the name Vandal, but it sure beats Wolf. Wolf. Super lame. I would hate to be named. You know what? Let's just move on. So Emily's walking around listening to music. Whoa, check out the gear. They don't make them like that anymore. Thankfully. Now, when I go on walks, I make sure to bring my Raycon everyday earbuds with me. As a dad, I don't get much time to myself. So when I do, I really appreciate it. Whether it's taking a walk, taking out the trash, or just taking a break. It's what I like to call dad time. And during dad time, I'm wearing Raycon everyday earbuds. First thing I like about them, they have a 32-hour battery life. It's such a bummer when things run out of battery super quick, but you don't have to worry about that with these. And you get 90 minutes of that battery with just 10 minutes of charging. Another cool thing, they come in more colors than just black. I got the blue ones. I don't think I've seen earbuds in that color before. You also got more color options with the protective case covers. Not only do they look cool, they also support wireless charging. Raycon everyday earbuds are really comfortable. One of the biggest turnoffs with earbuds is when they fall out while you're walking or jogging, but I haven't had that happen with these. Active noise cancellation so you can focus, which is a feature you don't usually see at this price point. Multi-point connectivity so you can listen to multiple devices, and all at an affordable dad-friendly price. Just half the price of other premium audio brands. So hey, if you know someone who needs some dad time, go to buyraycon.com/JohnWolfe to get 15% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to talking about that mysterious swamp dog. Most of the conflict for the rest of the story revolves around Grady's new dog Vandal. As mysterious as Vandal appeared, he also mysteriously disappears into the swamp at night. Soon, animal corpses begin appearing on the Tuckers' property. First, it's a dead rabbit. Mr. Stein writes that its small black eyes were frozen open in terror. Yeesh, isn't this a children's book? And this is when Emily's villain arc begins.
It's that stupid dog, I know it is. We should have taken it right to the pound when we found it.
Grady comes across other dead animals in the swamp that he describes as being ripped or torn apart by something. Will is quick to blame the hermit, but frames it as him just living off the land. The corpses begin to pile up, and soon even one of Mr. Tucker's beloved swamp deer becomes the latest victim. And that's when the dad starts to agree with Emily. Vandal is a killer and needs to be taken to the pound. The story very quickly shifts from being about the mysteries of Fever Swamp to being about Grady's determination to clear his dog of any wrongdoing. But is Vandal really innocent? Is Cassie/Will right and the swamp hermit is a werewolf? Well, the hermit himself answers that question. After overhearing Cassie spreading rumors about him, the hermit starts laughing and shrieking, "I'm the werewolf! I'm the werewolf!" and starts chasing the kids around while swinging the corpse of a wild turkey over his head. They don't include this scene in the TV show, and in the graphic novel they choose to omit the turkey, but it's still a disturbing scene. Oh, relax, Grady. He's just teasing you. Get it? He's just pretending to be a lunatic. Teasing or not, it's still a little menacing. And in the episode, he does something even more menacing. He kidnaps Grady. He captures Grady in a net trap and takes him to his little shack, and at one point, he even proudly shows him one of his guns. Grady manages to escape while the hermit is howling at the full moon, swinging turkey corpses over his head, kidnapping children in net traps. I mean, what is going on with that guy? If he is a werewolf, At least he still has a sense of humor, and if he's not a werewolf, he needs to be put on a list. On his way back home, Grady allegedly gets attacked by a green snake. He even claims to feel its fangs sink into his ankle. Yeah, right. Just like the tree root hands from earlier, huh? Well, I'm not falling for this one. Oh, hey, he really did get bit by a snake. Weird. This is probably a good time to mention something unsurprising, and that's that I can't stand Grady's scientist dad. He tells Grady after treating the snake bite that, and I quote, "Green snakes aren't poisonous." Okay, listen, Mr. Scientist, like, aren't you supposed to be a biologist? You're studying these swamp deer, and you're speaking with authority on snakes here, but then you say green snakes aren't poisonous. First of all, okay, trust me, I hate to be that guy, but no snake is poisonous. Snakes are venomous. They have venom, not poison. So actually, Mr. Tucker here is correct. Green snakes aren't poisonous. And neither are red snakes, black snakes, brown snakes, or any other color of snake. None of them are poisonous. So technically he's right. Second, even if we amend this statement to be green snakes aren't venomous, yeah, there are venomous green snakes. Green mambas, for example, highly venomous. There's also the boomslang, another highly venomous green snake. What Mr. Tucker probably meant to say is that there are no venomous green snakes native to the United States, which is true. But when you're dealing with scenarios like this as a scientist, allegedly, yeah, I'm a little skeptical of his qualifications, you have to consider possibilities like, say, it's an invasive species or an escaped pet. Who knows what kind of snakes the swamp hermit keeps in his shack, you know? Just very disappointed in Mr. Tucker. Be more concerned for your children. I know this was the 90s, but like, they're not out there catching crawdads in the creek, you know? They're out there in a weird swamp where a random old guy has chased them more than once. All right, sorry, back to the werewolf story for children.
He's completely irrational. Maybe he has that swamp fever he's been babbling about.
Thanks, Emily. Glad you're here. It's the final night of the full moon, and the story is about to come to a climax. And this is actually where the book and the episode do things very differently. We've got about 10 pages left in the book and about 15 minutes left in the two-part TV episode. And what a wild ride that 15 minutes is. In the book, Grady simply leaves his family at home and sneaks out of the house to join Vandal for one last romp in the swamp. But in the show, well, things get really exciting. Grady returns home and tries to warn his family about the swamp hermit transforming into a werewolf.
He's a werewolf.
Oh, I don't have time for this.
Emily's at the movies and Mr. Tucker's in town getting supplies, so it's just his mom there for now. Grady gives an impassioned speech and pleads with his mom to believe him.
What if you knew something was true, but you couldn't prove it? Something horrible you knew it could never be explained.
You know, I gave him a hard time about the distracting voice, but Brendan Fletcher really kills it in this episode. He has such an earnestness in his performance, and you can really feel how much Grady cares about his dog Vandal. The episode also does a great job with the music. Like in this scene, it starts ramping up as Grady's talking, and we're given a very clear indicator that the stakes are about to get high. Actually, the music throughout the episode really heightens the tension in so many scenes. The composer for this episode is Brad McDonald, who did an outstanding job. But what's weird is that I've been, let's say, less than impressed with other episodes he's composed for.
Hormones.
It makes me wonder if the atmospheric music direction in Werewolf of Fever Swamp are more coming from the director rather than the composer, but we'll talk more about him after we're done with the story. Grady and his mom are all alone at the house when suddenly, the swamp deer all escape their enclosure, thanks to what appears to be some interference from Vandal.
Grady, go call the sheriff to get rid of that dog.
But just as Mrs. Tucker is moving the dog into the shed, Grady pulls a fast one and locks her in.
You'll be safe in there, Mom. It won't be able to get you. Grady!
That's when Grady hears a cry from Will. And he decides to go check on Will in his house next door. Emily's home from the movies now, so she's headed inside the house. So you can see how it's being set up. All the family members are being separated. Mom's in the shed, Grady's next door, and Emily's all alone at the house. Or is she? Emily wanders around worriedly, while Grady can't find any sign of Will. And Mrs. Tucker is, I don't know, pacing angrily. We're not really given an update on her. Emily finally notices that something is terribly wrong in the house. The werewolf is inside the house, and it's after her. There's a thrilling chase sequence here, at least by Goosebumps standards. Emily runs outside and heads for the shed. She and Mrs. Tucker shiver and shake in there while the werewolf just starts going ham out there. This is a pretty terrifying scene for a kid's show. You could just tell by the way the werewolf moves that it does not discriminate, and it's gonna rip apart anything that moves. The werewolf finally leaves, and the Tucker women are safe and sound. Whoa, just kidding, he was trying to trick them before Mrs. Tucker whacks him off. Whacks him off? Maybe she beats him off? No, that sounds worse. You know what? Forget it. Grady ends up in the swamp searching for Vandal, and here's where the stories reconvene. He stumbles upon the hermit's shack, and he realizes he's in trouble. Big trouble. He's finally face to face with the werewolf. The werewolf attacks him. Grady grapples with the beast. And this is when he realizes who the werewolf really is. The episode reveals this in a clever way by having a lunar eclipse temporarily de-transform the werewolf.
Get away!
Will!
Get away, Grady!
Yep, the werewolf is actually his neighbor, Will Blake. Will being the werewolf isn't entirely unexpected. He says a lot of weird stuff, especially in the show. But something I found interesting is that his evilness depends on the adaptation. The show version of Will is very conflicted. The classic Jekyll and Hyde dynamic.
I don't want to hurt you, but I can't help myself, Grady.
In the graphic novel adaptation, Will actually taunts Grady while in werewolf form, which is a pretty sinister choice, especially for an adaptation that up to this point was basically just verbatim from the book. In the book though, Will doesn't say anything. It could be that he's oblivious to what's really going on. Whether or not he means to be though, Will is a violent animal, a bad dog that needs to be put down. Vandal shows up and attacks the Will Wolf. In the book, Vandal just straight up murders him, which is pretty crazy. You know, even if he's not a werewolf, maybe Emily had a point about this dog. Damn. In the episode, Vandal pushes the Will Wolf into the quicksand, and he disappears underneath the bubbling surface. This was a place that Will took Grady to earlier in the show, and he called it the heart of the swamp.
A couple of years ago, a kid fell in, sucked him down like quicksand.
Oh, the irony.
Poor Will.
Oh no. Anyway.
All right, so the Will Wolf is gone. The evil has been defeated! Except there's a twist. You see, Will bit Grady in their struggle on that final night, which means...
One bite, man, that's all it takes, and you'll be just like him.
And the story ends with Grady as a new werewolf running alongside his friend Vandal into the swamp to go hunt. Wow. You know what they say? It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. So before we get into my thoughts on Werewolf of Fever Swamp, you may notice if you're playing along on Goose Bingo that it's looking really thin. Not a lot of the usual tropes in this one. So I'll go ahead and give you a few more. Well, at a couple different points, Grady's dog growls mysteriously, so we could file that under this one. Oh man, this was really frustrating. Grady tries to shout for dad here, but his throat is too dry. It's almost I tried to scream, but no sound came out, and mouth feels like cotton. The only problem is Mr. Stein didn't use the usual phrasing, so it doesn't count. Near the end of the episode, Mr. and Mrs. Tucker check in on Grady while he's asleep, and as it turns out, it was all a dream. Oh yeah, and then this happens. This is how the TV show version ends. Grady walks outside and does this. Oh, okay. Gonna leave it up in the air, whether he's a werewolf or not, huh? Well, that's how most people seem to interpret the ending anyway. But actually, I have my own theory on this, because Grady howls at the moon just like the swamp hermit did earlier in the episode. And I'd like to think that this is actually Grady's way of expressing that he finally feels at home in the swamp. Throughout the story, Grady talks about how uncomfortable he feels in Fever Swamp.
Don't feel right about this place. It just feels so weird.
He spends a lot of time grieving his life before the move.
Bet you had lots of friends where you came from.
Yeah, like 20 right on my street.
Oh, that must have been great.
Was.
So I look at the TV show ending as a full circle moment, where Grady's finally in the acceptance stage of this grief that he's been expressing throughout the story. I don't think he's a werewolf in the episode. They don't show him being bit by Will, and he's not transforming when the full moon is in view, so I don't think it's intended to be ambiguous like that. It's just him feeling at home. I also think this because in the show, Wolfe kills the hermit. Yeah, he tries to catch the werewolf in that net trap, but misses. Apparently, the show's version of the hermit had his wife and children killed by the werewolf, and ever since then he's vowed revenge, so that's why he kidnaps Grady, because he thinks Grady might be the werewolf at first. Which is kind of ridiculous because Grady hadn't lived there before last week, but whatever. No one said the hermit was a genius, right? So overall, after experiencing the Werewolf of Fever Swamp again as an adult, what do I think of it? Well, honestly, I wasn't wowed by the book version. The werewolf only shows up for literally one chapter out of like 28, and the rest of the time is spent basically stalling. Grady trips on a tree root. Grady gets bit by a snake. Grady gets tackled and licked by a stray dog. Emily teaches Grady what a peat bog is. Did you know that moss can hold 25 times its weight in water? Wow, fascinating. There's a lot of emphasis on clearing Grady's dog of any wrongdoing, which, as I alluded to earlier, is one of the reasons I think the werewolf on the cover looks like it's just a dog. I think this is literally just Vandal on the cover. Probably right after he pushed Will into the quicksand. That only happens in the show, but it's my headcanon, okay? While I do want Vandal's name to be cleared, it does take up the majority of the story's focus. And I will say that despite the many detailed descriptions of animals' mutilated corpses in this book, it's nice to see Mr. Stein not only portray the dog in a sympathetic light, but even make the dog the hero of the story. I mean, we're talking about a guy whose very first entry in the series ends with the heartwarming twist that the family dog is dead. But ultimately, I think there's just not enough interesting story threads here. We don't learn anything about the hermit in the book. We don't learn anything about Will, really. The family's not involved in any of the danger. There's just way too much time spent with Grady kind of just wandering around the swamp and tripping on tree roots. There's not enough world building, and this would have been the perfect time for it because the overwhelming majority of Goosebumps stories take place in the suburban sprawl. Fever Swamp would have been a great place for Mr. Stein to stretch his legs and really start mythologizing some stuff. And don't say he can't do it, because he very enthusiastically world builds later in the series. To great effect, I might add. There is a little extra Fever Swamp world building in the comic series Secrets of the Swamp. A whole lot of it, actually. Turns out, Fever Swamp is a battleground now between an army of werewolves and wolf hunters. The scale is a little too grand for my taste. I liked Fever Swamp better when it was just Will wandering around in there, but now you can't walk 5 feet without tripping over a handful of werewolves. Makes it feel less special, you know? The werewolves are portrayed sympathetically too, which I find very polarized to how Mr. Stein always portrays them, as monsters. I heavily prefer the latter treatment. This other way just kind of feels like the vampires in Twilight. I'm not trying to hashtag not my Goosebumps this story arc here, but this is just not how I envisioned the Fever Swamp lore being expanded. I was thinking something more Lovecraftian, where the swamp has a supernatural power to affect people. A more abstract horror atmosphere than a turf war between werewolves and hunters.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
I'm getting off track now. All that to say, I think the book version of Werewolf of Fever Swamp could have done a much better job fleshing out the world and characters. With that said, I do prefer how some things were portrayed in the book, like how Mr. Stein handled Will's house. It happens at the very end. Mr. Tucker goes to Will's house after everything is over, but puzzledly reports back that the house is completely empty. In the episode, Grady finds Will's house trashed with claw marks and stuff, which I find a lot less compelling. You're telling me the werewolf still had furniture? No. I like the book version of that better because Will's house being totally empty implies that he just kind of knuckle drags around the swamp in his spare time and he doesn't have a home to go back to. It's creepier to imagine Will just being out there at all times rather than imagining him going back home to like, well, let's see what's on TV, you know? So that's the book version. We're back to the question I posed at the very beginning, which was it the story of Werewolf of Fever Swamp that got me so good as a kid, or was it the TV episode? Well, it was the TV episode. As much as I liked the TV version of The Haunted Mask, starring the Meryl Streep of Goosebumps herself, Catherine Long, playing Carly Beth Caldwell, I have to say, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp is far and away the best episode of the show I've seen so far. I already commented on the music, but everything about it is excellent. The actors all do a good job to varying degrees, and most of all, I think the director, a guy named William Fruitt, is responsible for the higher all-around quality. Fruitt directed 27 episodes of the Goosebumps TV show, but look at the track record here. Some of my favorites already. Piano Lessons, Stay Out of the Basement, these were all above average episodes for me. You can see Fruitt's direction shine in some of the shots like these. I mean, look at this. I'm not saying Francis Ford Coppola should move over, but this is pretty sick for Goosebumps. Lots of cool little moments in there, like this scene where the werewolf skeleton rises out of the quicksand. They certainly weren't just phoning it in, and I respect that. What I also liked about the direction is that, to me, it seems very Jurassic Park inspired, and that's one of my favorite movies. Take this scene, for example. I think this is the perfect way to depict a werewolf, too. Interestingly, they pretty much remade the Raptor Kitchen scene, but for kids, in the 2016 Goosebumps movie, where the Werewolf of Fever Swamp stalks the main cast in the frozen aisle of the grocery store. Come on. Anyway, there's also this part when the hermit realizes his trap didn't catch the werewolf.
Run, boy!
Clever girl.
The decision to have the werewolf attack the Tucker family in their home really paid off all the tension they were building, too. Instead of Grady wrestling a werewolf for a couple seconds, they had the chase scene with Emily, the scene where her mom and her are hiding out in the shed. I mean, the suspense of the werewolf's identity is a key part of the story, but when I watch something with werewolves, I'm really gonna wanna, see the werewolf. There are several other Goosebumps stories about werewolves, and while my memory isn't the sharpest, I'm willing to bet they at least had more werewolf scenes in them than Fever Swamp did. I guess we'll find out for sure when we get to them. Well, no point putting it off any longer. Time to rate this thing officially. First category, spine shivers, which rates how scary the story was. The book gets a 3 for me, but don't worry, the episode is a 5. I mean, come on. Enough said. Next, we'll rate Funny Bones, how funny the story was. The tone was consistently serious throughout. I think the most lighthearted it got was at the very beginning when Grady and Emily were pranking each other. The episode has some amusing throwaway lines though, mostly involving Emily.
Excuse me, doesn't anyone care about what I think?
Overall, it's a 1 for both, I think. Not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the funniest stories in this series are also some of the worst. And finally, we have Closet Skeletons, which rates the twist. I'm going to ignore the ending twist that Grady becomes a werewolf and opt to rate the twist that Will was the werewolf for most of the story. I think this twist is worth a 2 in the show. They made Will way more suspicious in the show with all his little campfire stories he told Grady. And the book, I'll give it a 3 because he's shown as a full-blown skeptic. Overall rating for the book, I'm sorry to have to say this, but it's a C. I really wanted to give it higher than that, but sadly, it's just not possible. Too many benign chapter cliffhangers and not enough world building. Only 3 pages of the actual werewolf. There's just not enough good to balance out the bad. Now, the TV episode, on the other hand, that is getting an emphatic A. I really liked the Haunted Mask episode, but I think on rewatch, the Fever Swamp episode outdoes it. The pacing, the music, the shots. Honestly, I think this is the one episode of Goosebumps I might actually recommend for an adult horror fan to watch. Don't get me wrong, it's not The Exorcist or anything, but for a piece of children's horror media, it's exemplary. The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. What a wild ride. But the ride ends here, because the story that comes next isn't wild, and it certainly isn't a ride. I'm talking about one of the more universally panned stories in the series, number 15, You Can't Scare Me. Great cover, though. January 1994. Mrs. Doubtfire was number 1 at the box office. Nirvana was number 1 on the rock charts. And You Can't Scare Me was released as the 15th book in the series. Listen, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. Do I love the baby blue? No. Do I love the cover tagline? No. But nothing can hold this cover back from iconic status. This is a story that's completely carried by the cover illustration. These guys are called the Mud Monsters, and it's a 5 out of 5 on the Necronomicon scale. The Mud Monsters only appear in this one story, and spoiler alert, they're not around for very much of it. But that didn't stop the Goosebumps brand from slapping these guys on all kinds of merchandise. The Mud Monster appeared alongside Goosebumps icons like Slappy and the Haunted Mask, all thanks to the brilliant cover illustration. Certainly wasn't thanks to the story, I'll tell you that much. The real star of You Can't Scare Me isn't even the Mud Monsters, though. It's Courtney King, fashion icon.
Thank you.
Yeah, you heard me. Courtney's awesome. Although it kind of seems like she's not intended to be. The book's central character is actually a boy named Eddie, a kid who finds himself at odds with a girl in his class who seems to be completely fearless. Pretty much the entire story revolves around Eddie trying, in vain, to scare Courtney. Hence the title, You can't scare me. Well, it took 15 books, but Mr. Stein finally broke down and wrote a story about nonstop pranks from beginning to end. It's a dream come true. The story begins on a class field trip to a forest, apparently. Well, in the book at least. The show starts a little later on, with Courtney doing a smug presentation in the classroom.
People have a need to create monsters. It helps us believe that the real world isn't as scary as the monsters we dream up.
Courtney is played by actress Charlotte Sullivan, who still acts in TV series very frequently today. For example, 10 episodes as Anna Turner on Chicago Fire. She does a great job playing Courtney in an episode full of performances that aren't particularly good, no less. Time to check in on our heroes. Eddie has 3 friends named Molly, Charlene, and Hat. Named such because he always wears a hat. Wow. Anyway, I noticed right away that these 4 are always slugging each other on the shoulder, pushing each other around, insulting one another, and just in general being kind of unpleasant to be around. Trust me, I can appreciate some good banter. The key word, good.
No way, I ain't doing it.
Chicken. I know you are, but when am I? That's so funny I forgot to laugh. You get it.
Eddie and his 3 friends, though, I mean this in the nicest possible way, considering I'm talking about fictional 12-year-olds, but losers. They're losers, dude. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let's see what Eddie and his pals get up to. Eddie gets attacked on the forest field trip by a green snake. He tries to scream, but no sound comes out. A green snake? Dude, no way Mr. Stein tries to pull the green snake trivia on us. In back-to-back books, are you kidding me? Courtney pulls the green snake off Eddie, and there it is. Everyone knows green snakes are harmless. I have to wonder where Mr. Stein learned this little green snake fact, because it's amazing to me that he used it twice. I wonder how many times it'll come up in the future. Like, should we add it to the bingo card or what? Courtney holds 2 huge bumblebees in her hand as her classmates crowd around her. Bees will not attack you unless they are provoked, she says, before tossing them at Eddie, who totally freaks out. Humiliated by Courtney's fearlessness, Eddie plots with his 3 friends to scare Courtney, and he theorizes that she might be scared by the legend of the mud monsters. There's not much lore here, really, at least not yet. Basically, the legend is that there are mud monsters down in a place called Muddy Creek, and they come out when the moon is full. Honestly, it's really strange to me that you've got 2 stories in a row here that take place in the wetlands with monsters that transform under the full moon and harmless green snakes. It almost feels like I'm reading the same story again. Anyway, the rest of the story is just Eddie and his friends trying unsuccessfully to scare the unscarable Courtney King. Molly proposes they put a rubber snake in her lunch. Unfortunately, that day, Courtney offers to share her lunch with a teacher who forgot his lunch, and they end up scaring the teacher instead. In the book, Courtney viciously stomps the rubber snake to death. Jeez. In the show, actually, the boys put a real snake in her lunch instead of a rubber one. And she immediately starts handling it.
Hey, it's just a corn snake.
Wow, seriously, what is with all this snake trivia? It's funny, actually, because in the Werewolf of Fever Swamp episode, there's also a moment where a character gets scared by a corn snake.
Oh, it's a little corn snake.
I am really amazed at how many connections there are between these 2 stories, snake-related and otherwise. One nitpick on the show, when the teacher pulls the snake out of the lunch bag, it's clearly a rubber snake, and it's not even the right color. Actually, it might even be the same rubber snake prop that's in this shot in Werewolf of Fever Swamp, where Mr. Tucker is holding one. Wow, was the budget really that low that they were reusing rubber snake props? Anyway, Eddie's neighbor asks him to rescue her cat from a tree, but Eddie stalls, saying he's afraid of heights. Okay. That's when Courtney shows up and rescues the cat easily. Barely an inconvenience. In response to this awful transgression, Hat proposes they put a live tarantula down her back. They're so jealous. It's just pathetic. It's pathetic, from the root word in Greek, pathos, meaning suffering or pain. I actually don't know if that's true or not. I was just trying to get into character. Eddie and Hat sneak into the science lab to borrow a tarantula. You know, to scare Courtney with. Molly and Charlene trick Courtney into standing underneath a balcony in the gym, and Hat drops the tarantula on her head. Just kidding, they drop it on their friend Molly by accident. Courtney picks up the tarantula with her bare hands and starts soothing it. In the episode, Courtney actually picks up the tarantula off of Eddie, who's trapped in the science lab closet. The reason the scene's a little different is because Molly and Charlene actually aren't in the episode, like at all.
Tarantulas hardly ever bite, and even if they do, it doesn't hurt.
You know, so far, we've only seen Courtney do things that I would classify as totally cool and based, actually. She rescued a cat, she soothed a stressed out tarantula. In the episode, she even offers to help Eddie with his report.
And we're looking forward to hearing yours, if you can ever get it out of your computer.
But it really is stuck in there. If you want to download it to a disk, I'm sure I can help you print it.
Maybe Courtney can help you, Eddie?
Oh, your report is stuck in your computer? Like I said before, a loser. But also, download it to a disk. Sorry, Courtney, but we're counting that for bingo. Eddie's big brother Kevin theorizes that they need something bigger than a snake or a tarantula to scare Courtney, so Eddie and his friends hatch up a new plan. They decide to have Charlene's giant dog, Buttercup, pretend to attack Courtney and her friend in the middle of the woods, and Eddie even gets the idea to add shaving cream around the dog's mouth so that he looks rabid. You know, I can't help but notice that their ideas are increasingly just animal abuse. Courtney would never do something like this.
I love all creatures.
As they trek through the woods, Charlene complains, "Ooh, my mouth is kinda dry." Listen, Charlene, either say that it feels like cotton or don't waste my time, okay? Fortunately, just as Eddie's about to put the shaving cream on Buttercup, the dog just takes off. And wouldn't you know it, Courtney's the one who finds him. Uh-oh, our little crew of bullies is starting to run out of ideas. They're starting to lose hope. When one day, they uncover some startling news. Courtney believes in monsters.
There are scientists that believe Bigfoot really exists, and the Loch Ness Monster too.
Yeah, turns out she believes in the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and all kinds of cryptids. And this gives Eddie an idea. You see, Eddie's brother Kevin, who I mentioned earlier, he's been making a little home video horror movie called Mud Monsters of Muddy Creek. He has costumes and everything. So Eddie contracts him to use the Mud Monster costumes to scare Courtney in the middle of the woods at night. They try to do the same prank in the episode, but since there's no Kevin, Eddie and Hat just kind of cover themselves in mud. Doesn't really hit the same. We actually get a little bit of lore and world building about the Mud Monsters at this point. 100 pages into the story, but I digress. Turns out, the Mud Monsters are the citizens of a local village that drowned in a huge mudslide. It engulfed the entire village. And once a year, on a night when the moon is full, they rise from the mud to seek revenge and pull anyone they can find down into the mud with them. It's not bad lore, honestly. Would have been pretty cool in a book that wasn't just all about pranks. Anyway, the trap is set. Courtney believes in the local legend of the Mud Monsters, right? Molly calls Courtney on the phone and tells her she heard the Mud Monsters are real and they're showing up tonight. But Courtney can stay home if she's scared. Well, Courtney takes umbrage with that and defiantly says she's going down to Muddy Creek tonight. She shows up all right, and so do Kevin and his friends in their Mud Monster costumes. They start closing in on Courtney and her friend, who don't see them yet. Eddie and his friends eagerly watch on from a distance, waiting to hear Courtney finally get scared. Then they hear something behind them. Wait a second. It's Kevin, who says, "Sorry they're late, they had a flat tire?" But then, if he's not, then who? Oh no. Yeah, so Eddie comes to the realization that those are 3 real mud monsters closing in on Courtney. In an overall very mediocre book, I thought this was actually a fun way to reveal that. Also, we finally got the bingo square real horror mistaken for prank. Eddie yells out to Courtney, telling her to run. And that's when Courtney starts screaming at the mud monsters, over and over. It's the moment that Eddie and his friends have worked towards the entire book. But instead of celebrating or reveling in it, they all run screaming home. And that's how it ends. Wow. I'll give my full thoughts on the book ending in a bit, but before that, we have to talk about how the episode ends, because if you don't like Courtney yet, for whatever reason, you will have no choice but to like her after you see this. Courtney shows up at Muddy Creek, only to stumble upon Eddie and Hat, all muddied up and ready to scare her. So, of course, she starts taunting them.
But what is really interesting is your persistence, what keeps you going. It reminds me of some lab rats I once saw in some science experiment.
But then, uh-oh. Look behind you, Courtney! It's a real mud monster!
You are right.
She doesn't react to it the way you might expect.
Don't interrupt. I can feel your anger. Now, we have to talk about your aggressive behavior. You can't expect sympathy from people if you're always attacking them, you know.
Courtney just starts monologuing at the mud monster until it falls asleep.
Are you even listening to me?
Courtney literally tells the mud monster that it must seek therapy if it is to properly heal. You see what I mean? Courtney is the real protagonist here, not those two losers. That's why the title of the book is from her perspective. You can't scare me. Which makes this the first story, and possibly the only story in the series, that's narrated by the antagonists. It's funny because I think the goal with Courtney's character was to make her into this insufferable, smug Regina George type. That was the desired effect, I think, but instead they just created a badass. She rescues cats, she befriends stray dogs, she tells mud monsters to seek therapy. I mean, am I missing something, or is she just awesome?
The thing about computers these days, anyone can figure them out. Oh, sorry, Eddie. I didn't see you.
The episode's not quite over, by the way. The news crew arrives to document Courtney's astonishing find.
As I told the president earlier when he phoned to congratulate me, saving the lives of two frightened little boys, Hat and Eddie, was something I had to do.
The mud monster comes back to life for a last-second jump scare, but I don't know why they even bothered with this. And with that, You Can't Scare Me comes to a close. Like I said, this is one of the more universally panned stories in the series, and I can kind of see why. You know, the mud monster reveal at the end of the book aside, it's like 100 pages of these loser kids trying to prank their classmate. And once the real horror arrives at the end, it's over almost immediately. Now, this isn't too different from Mr. Stein's usual pattern of writing in these early stories, honestly. Like, Night of the Living Dummy is like 90% sibling pranks until the very end. Werewolf of Fever Swamp has a lot of tree roots and green snakes, and then just 2 pages of werewolf action in the conclusion. But the difference, I think, is that those stories leave crumbs. There's hints here and there that actually there is something supernatural going on. You Can't Scare Me has no such crumbs, which makes the reveal at the end more effective and interesting, but the journey there gets kind of excruciating. I actually don't dislike this one as much as you might think. I think the ending is kind of a cool, ironic moment where the group is horrified by accomplishing their goal. But overall, it is kind of a slog. Let's rate this thing and get out of here. Book rating, speed round. Spine shivers, 1 out of 5. It's just not scary. Funny bones, 3 out of 5. Some funny stuff happens. Like, for example, at one point, Molly tries to prank Courtney by calling her and pretending to be her friend. Except she gets busted because Courtney's friend is sitting right next to her. Wah, wah. It's also kind of funny when they have all this build-up for things like the tarantula prank, but then they either end up messing up big time or Courtney's just unfazed by it. Closet Skeletons, 3 out of 5. The Mud Monsters reveal was the lone bright spot of the story. I liked how it was revealed by Kevin and his friends showing up late. Overall grade though, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to go with D. Sorry about that. Now for the episode. Spine shivers. Seriously, 0. I don't know if I've ever given a 0 before, but wow. Funny Bones, yeah, I'm giving it a 4, just for Courtney alone. Defeating the mud monster by talking at it was the best part, but honestly, she had lots of little throwaway lines that made me laugh. Like when the president supposedly called to congratulate her. Closet skeletons, I'll go with a 1, since the mud monster reveal wasn't done nearly as well as in the book. And that leaves us with the final grade.
Courtney, you know you don't need to do any extra work. You've already got an A+.
Yeah, but I was hoping I can get something higher.
Well, sorry, Courtney, but you're certainly not getting an A+ on this one. Overall grade, I'll be nice and give it a D. We almost had our very first F grade, but I bumped it up a letter just because of Courtney. With that, let's check in with the dread sheet, a spreadsheet of all the grades thus far. I'll be honest, I want to be inspired every time I see this, but instead I just sort of shake my head and think, wow, there's so many we haven't done. My kids are gonna be in college by the time we're through with this. Sadly, these 2 books were kind of a dud, but at least I got to watch possibly the best TV episode of the series. I also know way more about snakes now, so overall it was a win. Just when you think maybe we were running out of classic stories to look forward to, I'm happy to let you know that the next video is gonna be a really fun one. One Day at Horrorland. We not only have the book and TV episode to talk about, but there was also a board game and even a video game. And for the first time, I'll be checking out and reviewing all of it. So, I'll see you then. Take us home, Mr. Stein. Leave us with an image that goes hard.
Have a scary night, everyone.
Okay, that's good enough, I guess.